The HuddleCam SimplTrack3 is an advanced PTZ camera that combines a 20x lens and full HD sensor with advanced image tracking and auto framing. Anyone looking at cameras for use in educational, conference, or worship settings should definitely be paying attention to it. The SimplTrack3 is the latest generation in HuddleCam's line of object tracking PTZ cameras. While it can be fully controlled like any standard PTZ camera, the real strength of the SimplTrack comes from its set and forget auto tracking functionality. Using two independent video sensors, this camera can simultaneously deliver a wide-angle feed of the entire room while providing a close-up feed of the subject it's tracking. There's a lot to cover with this camera, so let's get started. You may have noticed an includes paid promotion tag at the start of this video. And we added that here because PTZ Optics did send us a SimplTrack3 for this overview. But with that said, they did not sponsor or pay us in any other way, and they have had no control over the content or opinions we're going to share in this video. In this video, we'll provide an overview of the SimplTrack3 camera and its connections, its video sensors, optics, and pan-tilt ranges, the software that's provided to work with the SimplTrack, how to connect with and set up the camera, configuring various preset zones, and adding advanced command triggers. We'll then wrap things up by sharing our list of the SimplTrack's key strengths and weaknesses, and leave you with our final thoughts. So let's get started by looking at the SimplTrack3 camera itself. The unit is 9.6 inches wide, 6.4 inches high, and it has a depth of just over 6 inches, and it weighs in at 5.7 pounds. Overall, it's a well-designed camera that can easily fit in a range of classroom, conference, or worship spaces. The SimplTrack3 comes with a pretty complete set of physical connection options. All of these ports run across the rear base of the unit. So, from left to right, we have a micro SD card slot, which can be used for recording video or capturing stills. There's an HDMI output port that supports up to 1080p 60 video. There's also a USB 3 port for using the SimplTrack as either a webcam or UVC compliant video device. And it should be noted that when using this connection, you'll be limited to 1080p 30 video resolution. There's also a 3.5mm analog audio input jack. There's a 3G SDI output port for connecting to traditional pro gear. There's also a 1 gigabit RJ45 network port. And this supports NDI HX2 feeds, SRT streams, RTSP and RTMP streams, IP camera control, and also connection to PTZ Optics' new Hive Studio for remote production control. There's an RS-232 in and out port for PTZ control, and there's a power port for the included power adapter. And if you're not using PoE, you will need to use this port to power the camera. I also want to point out that a USB port cannot supply sufficient power for this camera. So you will need to use one of these external power sources if you plan on using it that way. It's also worth noting that if you plan on using the SimplTrack3 in more complex setups, it is possible to use all of the physical and IP-based video ports simultaneously. The SimplTrack3 comes with two fully independent camera sensors. The primary sensor will capture the main image that will be used in your production, your core camera shot. The secondary sensor captures the image that will be used by the tracking software in the camera, letting it follow and frame subjects in its visual stage. Now, the primary sensor is used with the PTZ-mounted optics for the main camera feed. It's a Sony CMOS sensor that's just under 1/3 of an inch and captures 2.14 megapixels. And as you would expect, the main camera feed is available on all of the video outputs of the unit and offers a fairly broad range of production resolutions. These include 1080p 60, 50, 30 and 25, 720p 60 and 50, and even 360p 60 and 50. But what you probably didn't expect is that the wide-angle tracking feed is also available over the camera's IP-based connections, most importantly over NDI. And while it's only available in two resolutions, 720p 30 and 360p 60, and with a pretty basic lens, it could still be useful as a cutaway shot in some production situations. So now let's take a look at the main camera optics. The SimplTrack3 has a 20x zoom lens with a 4.7mm to 94mm focal range. And over this range, it has an aperture of between f1.6 and f3.5. Now in full frame equivalence, this would translate to around 31mm to 630mm with an aperture of between f11 and f24. Another important aspect of the SimplTrack3's optics is field of view. The camera has a horizontal field of view of 59.5 degrees when you're fully wide and 3 degrees at full zoom. At a distance of 50 feet from your subject, this would let you capture a horizontal span of 57 feet at full wide and 2.6 feet at full zoom. The SimplTrack3 has a vertical field of view of roughly 36 degrees when you're fully wide and 2 degrees at full zoom. So, at a distance of 50 feet from your subject, you'd capture a vertical span of just under 30 feet at full wide and 1.75 feet at full zoom. Since the SimplTrack3 is a PTZ camera, we have pan and tilt control to move these optics around. You can pan the camera across 170 degrees, and that can be covered at a speed from 0.1 degree per second up to 120 degrees per second. You can tilt the camera between 90 degrees up and 30 degrees down, and the tilt speed here will be from 0.1 degree per second up to 90 degrees per second. And I should note that while it is possible to mount the SimplTrack3 in an inverted position to get a steeper downward tilt angle, the tracking capabilities of the camera won't operate when it's set up this way. To start working with the SimplTrack3, you should first download the control application from the HuddleCamHD website. This software is needed to configure the camera and set up all of its tracking capabilities. Now, once you have the software installed and running, the first step is to add the SimplTrack3 as one of the cameras it can control. Just click the Start Search button in the Online Device section. When you see the camera listed, just click Add to Client, and you'll see a pop-up showing the camera and its network details. You'll just need to enter the camera's username and password, typically admin, and then click on Add. With that, the camera will be in the Device for Management list. You can then select the camera in the list and click on Remote Configuration. And this will pop up a window that will let you do all of the basic camera network and streaming settings. As the name SimplTrack implies, this camera is purpose-built for tracking people across a visual stage. There are a few things you'll need to initially configure in the Huddlecam app to get this set up. First, if the camera comes up in tracking mode already active, turn it off by clicking on Stop. Next, you need to go to the Preset dropdown and select Preset 0 Stage. This is the preset that the camera will go to when it starts up or if it loses the presenter sometime during the tracking. Now use the PTZ controls to frame up the stage exactly as you want it, and then click Set. Next, go to the Preset dropdown and select Preset 1 Subject. You'll set this preset as a template for the framing you want on the subject you'll be tracking. Use the PTZ controls to set this up, and then click Set again. With those two presets configured, you'll now need to set the visual stage that you want the camera to track your subject in, called the tracking zone. And to do that, you'll need to click on Settings, which will open a new page. Click on the Track Area button here, then draw a box around the area you'd like the subject to be tracked in. You can then click Save and Exit, which will bring you back to the main screen. Just click Start when you're ready to begin tracking. Here's an example of the SimplTrack following me across our studio area here. And you'll notice that as I move around, it does a good job following in the direction that I'm walking, then centering on me when I stop, and also responding well to some of the subtle motions I make. There can be situations where there are parts of the visual stage that you don't want the camera to track. This could be an area across the bottom where non-presenters could be moving, or areas like windows and doorways that could have motion beyond them. But note that it could also be areas in the visual stage where images of faces may appear, things like a video display. The SimplTrack3 has 8 blocking zones that you can set up to have it ignore any motion or faces in those areas. To set them up, just click on one of the blocking zone boxes and highlight the area you'd like the tracking software to ignore. In addition to blocking zones, you can also set up to 8 preset zones that will tell the camera to trigger a specific preset when a subject enters it. While a subject is inside that preset zone, the camera will stay locked on its assigned preset, and then go back to normal tracking when they leave that zone. So let's start by going into the HuddleCam app to set one up, and then we'll take a look at it in action. I'll open up the SimplTrack3 in the main view, and then click on Settings. On the right, you'll see a view from the tracking camera. The visual stage that you're tracking will be outlined with a green rectangle. Next, let's click on the first preset zone and select an area to trigger a specific preset in. This preset zone is drawn out as a blue rectangle. And to assign a specific preset to it, click on the Set button and use the PTZ controls to dial in the specific framing that you want to trigger. When done, click the Set button. Make sure to enable Enter Action boxes ticked, and then click Save. When you're ready, click Start to begin tracking again. So let's take a look at this in action. When I move to the left of the monitor, the SimplTrack3 follows my movements normally. Now, when I walk over to the right of the monitor, I've entered the preset zone that we set up, so the camera automatically goes to the assigned preset, framing me next to the monitor. And it will keep that framing until I walk back to the left out of the preset zone. And when I do that, normal tracking starts again. There is another incredibly powerful feature built into the SimplTrack3's preset zones, the ability to trigger hex or HTTP commands both when entering and leaving preset zones. So to set this up, just go to any preset zone that you already have set up and click the Set button. Below the tick box for Enable Enter Action, you'll need to click the tick box for Include Command. Then enter the protocol, IP address, port, and URL string for the command you want executed when someone enters that preset zone. And below that is a similar option for setting up a command to execute when someone leaves that preset zone. Now, since these commands can trigger actions across the network, they open up a range of production possibilities. To demonstrate this, we added commands to a vMix session that will change what is displayed on our studio monitor when I enter and leave the preset zone. When I'm standing to the left of the monitor, it displays a simple looping video. But now, when I move to the right of the monitor and enter the preset zone that we set up before, not only is the camera preset triggered, but a command is sent to vMix to now display a remote guest on the monitor. When I'm done interacting with that guest, I can exit the preset zone by moving back to the left side of the monitor, which now triggers a command to vMix to switch it back to my video loop. So, after spending a few weeks with the SimplTrack3, what were some of the things we liked most about the camera? Well, first would be the dual sensors that are built into the camera. The SimplTrack3 has a second camera sensor built in to make subject tracking more reliable. But what sets this feature apart is that it also provides an NDI feed from this sensor. While not at the same quality level as the main camera image, it does give you the flexibility of a built-in cutaway shot if you ever need it. Now next would be the full range of outputs that are available in the SimplTrack. The SimplTrack includes just about every physical and IP-based connection you might need, and they all work simultaneously. This lets you easily integrate this camera into almost any production setup. And we were also very impressed by the solid tracking performance of the unit. So during our testing, we had no trouble with the SimplTrack losing track of a subject or not recognizing when they entered or left a preset zone. And while the size of our studio limited camera placement to within about 25 feet of the subjects that were being tracked, we saw nothing to indicate that it wouldn't work equally well from the longer distances it supports. And finally, we think the ability to trigger commands is a game changer. It allows the SimplTrack to send out network-based commands when subjects enter and leave preset zones. And that will let you bring production automation to a new level. Switch cameras, change lighting, adjust signage, mute and unmute mics. The possibilities for this are pretty much unlimited. So what were some of the things we'd like to see improved? Well, first would be controls for setting headroom. While the SimplTrack3 has the controls to adjust headroom, it took us a while to get it dialed in. Since the auto tracking detects faces, it'd be great to have a simple slider control to proportionally set how far up from the center of the face you'd like the top of the frame to be. And next, we liked a browser interface to access camera settings. And while it is possible to access the camera's internal menu from the HuddleCam application, it'd be great to get into it directly from a browser. And this can be especially useful when making adjustments for color matching between the SimplTrack3 with other PTZ optics cameras that do allow for this. At a list price of $1,499 US, we think the SimplTrack3 is a compelling value for anyone looking for a camera that can automatically and accurately follow and frame moving subjects across a visual stage. The main sensor on the camera has a top resolution of 1080p 60, which is perfect for streaming. It captures sharp images in any well-lit environment, and the suite of physical and IP-based connections it delivers lets it easily integrate into almost any production setup. In short, The SimplTrack3 is an excellent tracking camera option for classrooms, boardrooms, and houses of worship, and we definitely recommend giving it a close look.